Hi, in this video we're going to be having a look at this microscope camera. So this was provided to me free of charge by Banggood, and currently on their website it's selling for about £105, and it's described as a 16 megapixel 1080p 60 frames per second USB-C mount camera. So this camera has the ability to take snapshots at 16 megapixels, but the video recording and video output to either the PC or the display is at 1080p 60 frames per second. So what we've got on the camera is it's fairly standard format, fairly smallish box camera. We've got a USB interface which can plug directly to the PC, and you can use it like a webcam, so you can view it in VLC or any other software. Or I think it comes with some software on this disc, but unfortunately I can't get this in my PC because it's the reduced diameter and I've got a slot loading DVD player, so it won't accept it. We've got a micro SD card which will accept up to 32 gigabyte cards. We've got a standard HDMI interface, and then we've got a couple of buttons here for manipulating the on-screen display, and finally the DC input. Also in the box comes a HDMI cable, which looks to be of reasonable quality. We've got a USB cable. We've got a mains adapter. In this case I've been sent the US version, but I'm going to use my own adapter anyway. We've got a infrared remote control, so it's got an infrared receiver on here, and this is an alternate way of manipulating the on-screen menu. And then we've got this interesting arrangement of lenses. This isn't applicable to what I'm going to be using it for, but these lenses allow you to poke your camera into the eyepiece on a standard microscope. Also, we've just got the user manual, which is reasonably written actually. It's not too bad at all and gives you a good indication of what all of the on-screen menu display items do. So this is the microscope setup we're going to use to test this camera. I'll provide a link for this microscope setup down below in the description, but we've got a 180 times C-mount lens, and then we've got a 0.5 times Barlow lens to give the extra range. So we've got about 10 inches of space under here to get your soldering iron and everything under, so we've got plenty of room here. And then we've just got a bog standard LED ring light to provide extra illumination, because once you've got this level of magnification with a fairly small lens like this, not a huge amount of light is actually getting to the camera. So to get this going, I've got a HDMI cable in going to my monitor just here, and then I've got a 12 volt supply coming into the DC connector, a 32 gigabyte SD card in here so we can test the recording functions, and we should just be able to turn this on. And yes, we've got a display. Right, so to start with, we're going to test the SD card recording function. So this is at probably around the least magnification that this particular lens does, and this has got loads of working room here. I'm literally at about 30 centimeters here, and you can see here actually I wouldn't have too much trouble getting in here. I can see this component perfectly fine, probably as well as I would do to the naked eye. Let's try zooming in a little bit, and here we go. This is at about half magnification. And that's really crisp. I mean, these are 0603 components here, and those are very visible, and certainly on the computer monitor that I'm viewing this on with the HDMI output, the movement here is very smooth. I'm not really seeing any blurriness as I'm moving the PCB around. So it'd be interesting to see what the SD card recording looks like, but certainly to work under this, I would have no trouble doing rework with these components here. Takes a little bit of getting used to because of the level of magnification, but yeah, this is very clear. And then here we are at maximum magnification, and this would be perfect for inspecting your solder connections. So if we do some SMD soldering videos, definitely if the soldering is good enough, we'll be having a look at this magnification level. But this would allow you to see any imperfections. You can see all of the flux on these pins here. You can see the quality of the silk screen on this PCB, which is actually really good. But yeah, this is very smooth, even at this magnification level. Hopefully the camera is picking up quite well what I'm seeing on the monitor as well. But certainly I'm able to work with this very easily. So in terms of the on-screen display, what you can do is set up things like the crosshairs. So if we go up to crosshair here, you've got a crosshair, you've got a grid that you can enable, and various settings associated with those. You can choose whether you've got a widescreen or a 4:3 picture. You can set the exposure, and you can set the white balance. I've just left it on automatic. We can choose whether we have the image in colour, black and white, or sepia. I'm not really sure why you'd want any of those other than colour. You've obviously got your language selection. You've got the frequency of either 50 or 60 Hertz, so that it rejects ambient light, powered from the main supply to stop it interfering with the image. You can set the date and the time. And then I think this will format the SD card, but I've got an SD card in here at the moment. You can restore all the factory defaults and then finally view the version number. So this firmware was programmed on the 22nd of January of this year, and it's actually at HY2307 from Heyyear. And they have actually got a legitimate website with lots of various microscope products. So when you plug the USB interface into the camera, unfortunately the HDMI output no longer functions to show what's going on in the camera. It would appear that we just get this blue box that says PC camera and then the Heyyear logo. Right, so I've managed to download the software called SI from the Heyyear website, and actually the website looks really good. There's loads of firmware update files and they seem to regularly update the firmware. The latest for this camera is February of this year. I'm not sure what the release notes say about the latest update, but it'd be interesting to read what they've changed. You've got the user manuals, and then of course you've got this software. So for previewing the image, it seems to be pretty responsive. So I would say that on the PC it's more like 30 frames per second or so, definitely not the 60 frames per second. I guess that's a limitation of the USB 2 connection. But certainly this would still be perfectly workable if you didn't have a HDMI input on your monitor. And then on the software you've got all of your standard settings, so the resolution, exposure, white balance, color adjustment, color mode, and then the ability to flip the image round depending on if you've got the camera in a different position. And then there's also these interesting settings, or functions rather, that allow you to do measurements. So, you can measure between points on the screen. Here it's giving the measurement in pixels, but once you've performed the calibration, you can actually get this to read in millimeters, which could be quite useful for PCB inspection. And yeah, you can use different tools for doing measurements. And then finally it's got the recording function. This does seem to make the display a bit laggy, so when I'm moving this around, certainly on the display now it's blurring. I'm not sure what the recording is going to look like, so we'll have to see. And it could just be that this is really hammering the processor to do the recording. But yeah, in terms of the functionality of the software, it seems to do exactly what it says it will do. Certainly no problems there. So my thoughts so far on this camera are that the camera is actually really good. So for me, the main thing is that the HDMI output has very little lag, and when I was pretending to solder on there, I could see everything in real time on the display, and certainly there was no lagginess that would make me have trouble with the soldering. And then we'll see what the SD card recording looks like, but I certainly haven't got any expectations that it will be any less than what I'm seeing on the HDMI output. I think the USB interface, it will struggle just because it's USB 2 interface. I think we'll probably be limited to the 30 frames per second, but yeah, it does seem really good, and for £100 or so, it's really not too bad at all. Banggood are supposed to be sending me another camera shortly, because there are quite a range on the website, and not a lot to differentiate what the differences between them all are. This seems to be quite similar to the basic camera that everyone seems to buy, but the software on this seems very good, and the ability to update the firmware quite easily you know, is a bonus really. So it'll be interesting to see what the next camera's like. When I bought this rig, I did actually buy a point grey camera off eBay, which was pretty expensive, and this has a really big sensor in it and can record at something like 150 frames per second, but the point grey software just isn't up to the task of what I would want it to do. And obviously there's no other output other than the USB 3 output here, so you do have to use the software, but the software itself is only designed to record in RAW format. You know, this is more designed for integration into your own software, so that software that they provide appears to be a bit more just like demo software. But if you wanted to do recording over, say, 10 minutes of soldering, you can only record in RAW, and you know, at that point you're recording 100 gigabytes worth of data, and the processor's screaming on the PC because it's trying to record everything and encode it in real time. So this wasn't really a good solution for me, and this so far seems to answer all those questions. It'll be interesting to see what the next camera that Banggood send me is like. So I hope you found that video useful. There's certainly going to be quite a few soldering videos coming up featuring this setup, so we'll be able to see some really good close-ups on one of these, you know, on these PCBs. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Click on the bell icon to be notified of further uploads, and until next time, thanks for watching.